The prison industrial complex is a system that encourages mass incarceration of the general public. Through policies such as the war on drugs and the tough on crime movement, low-income communities of color have been especially targeted. The vast majority of arrests are low-level drug-related crimes. Increased police presence combined with racial profiling tactics such as stop and frisk has led to an extraordinary number of Black and Latino men being put behind bars. While people of color make up about 30% of the U.S. population, they account for 60% of those imprisoned. Not only are people of color more likely to be arrested in their own community, but they are also more likely to be arrested at school. Black and Latino students make up 70% of all school arrests. As more for-profit prisons are built and more prisoners are put to work manufacturing products, incarceration becomes increasingly profitable. The prison industrial complex is a big threat to our communities and personal freedom.
The war on drugs is a governmental campaign started by Richard Nixon in 1971. It aimed to reduce the sale and use of illegal drugs. The main method used has been the increase of arrests and imprisonment for drug offenses. Policies such as mandatory sentencing has greatly increased our country's incarceration rates.
Since 1980, reports have shown that the number of inmates in prisons has increased by almost 800%. A congressional research report found that most new prisoners are being incarcerated for drug-related offenses. African American women are 3 times more likely to be incarcerated than white women, and Latinas are nearly 70% more likely to be incarcerated than their white peers. Since the 1980s, the number of arrests for drug offenses rose up about 126%, while the number of arrests in the US for other crimes has decreased by only 28%. Data cited by the United States Sentencing Commissions shown that African American and Caucasians have almost equal numbers of illegal drug use. Despite this fact, between 1990 and 2000, blacks were almost twice as likely to be imprisoned for drug offenses than whites. In addition to jail time, the US often used drug offenses as an excuse for deportation. In 1994, it was reported that the war on drugs resulted in the incarceration of 1 million citizens each year. 1/4 of these arrests were due to marijuana possession.
When we look at the war on drugs and when we look at the prison industrial complex, these components are very destructive to the family and the community due to the fact that whenever drug wars take place, because they play out in low-income communities, the members, the heads of household, the parents, the leaders, they usually wind up incarcerated. It tears up family. Once you start tearing up family, you start tearing up community. When you start tearing up family and community, you are affecting society on a whole.
Because it really magnifies the dysfunction in urban communities. You know, when I walk into a courtroom and I see that the crowd is predominantly Black and Latino, and if I look on the other side where the judges, lawyers, DAs, whatever, like, are predominantly white, that's a fact. Then you have these people who, not necessarily understanding the community, are weighing down decisions that ultimately change youth and adults' lives. But what I'm saying is that you're giving somebody 16 years old 8 to 10 years in jail. How are they supposed to rehabilitate? More than likely, they're not going to rehabilitate. They're going to become a better criminal. When you look at jail, you have prisons that hold, let's say, hypothetically, 1,000 prisoners, but they have 3,500 prisoners. So that means they're packing them in like slave ships. When you look at the mass incarceration, you figure somebody who's been gone for 5, 10 years, come back to the city, where they going to live? Now, let's say they have a felony. If they have a felony, they're not going to be able to see financial aid. They're not going to be able to vote. They're not going to receive any type of public assistance. All those different things are gone. So what happens to that person that's coming back with a felony? Now, we're talking about one person. I'm talking about multiple people who didn't get an education. Because in jails now, they're cutting a lot of those educational programs. They're cutting, exercise programs. So they're cutting all the things that would make somebody better to rehabilitate. But what's happening now, they're coming back angrier. They're coming back looking at no opportunity. A lot of times they come home, they'll have 5 years parole, or they'll have 5 years probation. Now, that's a setup in itself. You tell somebody for 5 years you can't get in trouble doing anything, but this is a person or people that have been in trouble their whole life. So how does it stop?
Oh, hi. I'm Professor Diaz. Some of you probably remember me from my previous film, Sustainable Teaching Methods. Well, actually today I'm stepping out of the classroom and into the streets to give you guys some key tips on how to avoid the prison industrial complex. I hope you enjoy. One way that I found to avoid the police was to stay as pale as possible. Police never stop a man wearing a suit because they think he's already going to court. Never forget your rights when being stopped and frisked. At least I know I won't forget mine. The best way to end the mass incarceration system is to educate yourself. The more we know about the system, the better chance we have at ending it.